While we're getting organized here, I would actually like to bring up Greg Garber from the John Wayne Cancer Institute to say a couple of words.
Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good. My name is Greg Graber, and I'm in fundraising with the John Wayne Cancer Foundation. And John Wayne said that courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. And I think that really sums up the way we like to fight cancer. John Wayne, many of you I'm sure know who he is. He's one of America's favorite actors of all time who lived here locally. We've got the airport named in his honor. And what some people don't know is that John Wayne actually fought cancer twice himself. So he became very passionate about wanting to find a cure, and that was his wish. And so his family created the John Wayne Cancer Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that's located here in Newport Beach in your backyard, that is doing some incredible work that we wanted to make you aware of and give you an opportunity to join us in the fight against cancer to show your grit. So the John Wayne Cancer Foundation, our mission is to bring courage, strength, and grit to the fight against cancer. And we do pioneering cancer research and education. We have a John Wayne Cancer Institute in Santa Monica, and one of the amazing things they do in addition to their research is what's called a fellowship program. We have one of the largest and one of the first fellowship programs that trains doctors how to research and treat cancer at the highest level, because it's so important for every patient to have the best doctor and the best fighting chance to win their fight against cancer. And so we also have an amazing community program called Block the Blaze. The John Wayne name has been affiliated with some of the best skin cancer research and breakthroughs. And so we wanted to do even more. And so we thought that the best way we could cure cancer, and skin cancer in particular, would be to prevent it and to detect it early enough so that we could treat it successfully. And so that's why we worked with UCI and Children's Hospital Orange County to help create this program called Block the Blaze, which now John Wayne Cancer Foundation is managing 100%. And what we do is we go out to the community, out to schools, and out to all the junior lifeguards, and we give them a presentation, and we tell them how to prevent skin cancer through the 5 sun-safe tips, and also what skin cancer looks like. So by doing this, they can prevent the disease, and if they do happen to get it, they can detect it early and take care of it. And 95 to 100% of skin cancer can be defeated just through prevention and early detection. And so with 1 in 3 people in California getting it and 1 in 5 nationally, that's a really important statistic to know. And so I also just wanted to show you, this is the hat that we give to every kid through the junior guards. That's one of the 5 sun-safe tips. We also give them John Wayne Cancer Foundation sunscreen, which you can actually purchase on our website, johnwayne.org, to help us raise money to support this program. And we also give them this brochure that I put on your chairs, our Block the Blaze brochure with great educational information for you, and we hope that that helps educate you. And the opportunity I wanted to discuss about how to get involved is called Team John Wayne. So I've put a flyer on your chair, and our premier local event is the Orange County Marathon. There's a 5K half marathon, full marathon, and we're looking for everyone to join us by forming a friends and family team. Corporate teams are fantastic for team building and showing your community support. We've got sponsorships, we've got volunteer opportunities, and there's many ways to get involved with it. And so we wanted to make all of you aware with it and welcome you to join us. And if you have any questions, my name's Greg Graber. My card's there at the back of the table, and you can also find us at johnwayne.org. And so I just wanted to thank the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce and all the speakers and everybody who's come out to this event for being part of this, and have a terrific day and look forward to some great presentations. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Greg. It's good to know we've got resources like that in our own backyard. So that said, normally there's another person who comes up and says a few words, and she says the same thing every time, so I will speak for her. Dee Dee is here as our sponsor from the Credit Union of Southern California. So rather than have her speak, I'll have you think for a minute about if you are in a need for a credit union account or any business like that, send it her way. They're a great sponsor. I'd also like to recognize the very important people we have here among us, which are basically all of you, but in particular elected officials. Excuse me. Scott Piotr is here. He's one of our Newport Beach City Councilmen, standing in the back. And, sorry, also Laura Oatman is here, running for Congress against Dana Rohrabacher. Do you want to stand up and wave so people know who you are? Great, thank you. So with that, I'd like to bring up our speaker because we want to give him adequate time, and this is going to be a really interesting program. I particularly, of course, think it's going to be interesting. He's a fellow CPA. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. It's been a little while since I've been up here. I'm Dorothy Larson. Dorothy Larson CPA now, new firm name. Was Larson and Associates. And also the chairman of the board of directors of the Newport Beach Public Library Foundation. So we've got great resources here too for all of you. Our speaker this morning is Eric Woolery. When Eric was elected to the Auditor Controller for the County of Orange, which is a really important role if anyone is ever concerned about corruption in government or anything like that, which is all over the news this morning, it's really important that we have someone like Eric in charge. So basically, it's important to note, out of a field of 5, he won with a historic margin and was sworn into office in January of 2015. Before he became Auditor Controller, he started out early in his career with Ernst & Young, I think it said, right? And back when there were 8. One of the big 8. He was with one of the final 4. Was with one of the ones that's long gone. He grew up locally. He went to Orange Lutheran and Cal State Fullerton. He also served as treasurer of the County of Orange. Married his high school sweetheart, very hometown boy, and lives in Orange, which is a wonderful city to our north. With that, without further ado, I would like to bring up Eric Woolery. He is the Auditor Controller for the county.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I am Eric Woolery, Orange County's elected Auditor Controller. And you know, I think we have like 3 hours to go over the county's finances in detail. Is that what I understood? Yeah. Anyway, I'll try to keep this interesting because, you know, the last thing I think anybody wants to hear early on a Thursday morning is a long dissertation about, you know, boring accounting stuff from a politician, right? Am I mistaken there? Anyway, with that, I'd like to get started. Anthony? We're going to start with a short video from one of our newest employees at the Auditor Controller's Office.
These numbers do not add up!
Well, the Auditor Controller's Office, unbeknownst to our newest employees, we do need to make the county's numbers add up. And as Auditor Controller, my office has 2 distinct functions, the audit and the controllership of the county. And the way I like to liken that so that folks understand it is the auditor portion, for those of you who are sports fans, is like the referee. They're out there making sure people follow the rules of our internal controls. The controller side is the scorekeepers. They're tabulating the numbers and keeping the score. In this case, it's our tax dollars, how they're spent, and you know where they're going. Also, my office has one other major function, or actually 2 other major functions. They're smaller and probably less known to the public. One is the role in property tax. We all know about the assessor, and we all know about the treasurer tax collector, because you usually get that notice from the assessor of what the value of your property is. And you all should have, in the last few weeks, gotten that nice little thing in the mail that's your property tax bill. But what a lot of folks don't understand is in the center is my office. Once the assessor creates that value to your property, it actually comes to my office. And those numbers on your tax bill, If they're wrong, please don't throw anything at me this morning. But the numbers on that tax bill are actually calculated by my office. And then once they're calculated, I turn those over to our treasurer tax collector, who then prints the bills, sends them out to you, and collects the money. And then there's the reverse. Once the money's collected, the money comes back to my office because I'm the dispersing agent of the county. So if you ever want a county check, and if you look at it, my signature will be on there. We're not giving out any county checks this morning, unfortunately. Sorry about that. But when that money comes back, we all know about that 1% that is the property tax under Prop 13. Well, that needs to be apportioned. My office does that apportionment. That apportionment is very critical to every local government in Orange County because your city, your schools, your special districts get that money from my office. And if we do not coordinate that and get that to your cities in time, then they don't have the money and the capital to pay their police, fire, whatever services they're providing for you. So we have this very large coordination at the county that we're constantly doing to make sure that all levels of local government are working. So that's kind of what my office does. Now, getting into the finances, and I'll talk about the county's finances quite a bit and then tie it in where I can to what's going on here locally in your city of Newport Beach. And the one thing I'd like to start with is there's a difference, and a lot of people don't understand that difference between the budget and then the actuals. At the office, we deal mainly with, well, we do the budget, but we also do the actual financials. What actually happened? Where was that money spent? The budget is a spending plan that is passed by our governing body, which for my office is the County Board of Supervisors. For locally, it would be your city council. That spending plan sets out the priorities of your agency. You know, how much you're going to spend on police, fire, social services, et cetera, public works. That's the spending plan. At the end of the day, we accumulate what actually happens. So anybody who's interested in what's going on in your city, county, school district should look at budget and then compare it with the actuals. And this is important because the spending plan is a set of priorities. And like I often tell people, I usually create more questions than I answer, because when you see the difference between what the spending plan was and what actually is spent, then that leads to the question, well, what's the difference? Why is it higher? Why is it lower? And like I say, I usually create more questions than I answer. I apologize for that, but it's kind of the nature of, you know, what the work I do. Now, looking at the county's finances, and these are a little old. This is the 2016 CAFR, June 2016. We're currently working on the audit for the June 2017, and we'll probably be issuing that. Traditionally, we issue that right around the end of December, mid-December or so. So that's coming out here in another month. We're currently going through our annual audit. But if you look at the general fund, budget versus actual, you know, we have our spending plan, what actually happened. You look at, you know, our revenues are kind of off a little bit, and our expenditures are way down. Well, once again, we're looking at numbers from like a 10, 30,000 foot level. If you drill down, once again, I'm creating more questions than I'm answering. If you drill down on that and look at where that revenue, budget versus actual, where those changes came from, well, the county budgeted in social services and the healthcare agency to have a certain caseload to use those funds. That caseload did not materialize. So the revenues are down there, and the expenditures are down because we didn't have the associated expenditures with those cases. But you'll notice that revenues are not down as much as the expenditures. That's because we have the fortunate luck or blessing of living in Orange County where our property values tend to continue going up. Our assessed value actually exceeded what we had thought, and so we actually had a boom in property tax to make up for some of that. Now, the good news with property tax, not to property owners necessarily, but the good news in property tax is that's a very stable, usually, unless it's 2008, it's usually a very stable funding source to fund local government, and most local governments, schools, cities, and the county That's their bread and butter tax. That's where we get most of the money to provide our services. And this is the general fund expenditures. We're 7% below. Ideally, that was, or mainly that was from the cases that didn't show up in healthcare and social services. A lot of that money in healthcare and social services is a pass-through. Just as an aside, the county is a $6 billion a year operation. 700 million of that is what we would call our general fund, 600 to 700 million of that. The general fund is what the board actually has discretion over to spend. The rest is all earmarked. It comes through pass-through grants from the state and the federal government, and they are for healthcare services, they're for public works, et cetera. If you look, a majority of the county's budget is in public service or public protection. Healthcare, public assistance, social services are the next big bite of the county's budget. And that general government there, if you ever say that, wait, we spend a lot on this infrastructure or the overhead, the general government's where my office, the assessor, treasurer, tax collector, and the others are. In the public protection, it's the usuals you would expect, the district attorney, the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department has the countywide services like the jails, district attorneys, countywide services, and the prosecution services. Also in there is probation, and believe it or not, the clerk recorder is in public protection. I still haven't figured out that one, but that's government. And one of the things we've tried to do in our presentation and the funding and the use of government or county monies is if you buy a product or service from a business, there's usually a cost associated directly with that product or service. If you buy a widget, the cost to the seller, the merchant, is X, and you get a markup. Well, in government, we don't have that a lot of times because we have general fund money. It's tax money. That tax money can be allocated to whatever the governing body chooses to prioritize. So what we tried to do here is to show where the funding of certain areas of the county operations came from. Public protection, general government, public assistance. And one of the questions, and I'll open up at the end if we have time for any questions, that I usually got when I gave this is, a few months ago with what's going on in Washington, there's a lot of concern over what happens if we are a sanctuary state and that federal money dries up. What potential impact, what areas would that affect? Well, that light blue is operating grants. That's where the federal and state pass-through revenues come from. A state pass-through would be a program that the feds would do at the state level. It goes through Sacramento before it comes here. Where you see that light blue is the biggest potential if we would lose any kind of funding through the sanctuary programs that the state is doing. And then you have the 5-year comparison of net position. For those of you in business, you would know this as your retained earnings, your equity in your business. For a governmental agency, it is a net position. You'll notice that the unrestricted, that's not restricted by any kind of legal or board designation, was positive in 2013, 2014, then it went negative in 2014, 2015. Well, several things happened between 2014 and 2015. One, I took office, but I'll assure you I had nothing to do with this negative. For those of you who are in the accounting world, CPAs, they've probably heard of Gadsby 68. I favored Gadsby 68. I think it should have been done 20 years ago or better. Gadsby 68, and I'm glad you're all sitting because when I heard this for the first time, I almost fell over. Before Gadsby 68, that unfunded pension liability was never put on a government entity's books. And if you let that sink in a minute, we went from, 716 million positive to 2.6 billion negative by booking that one liability. So that liability always existed. It wasn't like it just popped up overnight. It just wasn't accurately booked onto the accounting records. Now that's happening with all cities, schools, counties, et cetera. Now, the reason I think this is important is, it's a real liability, and if we're going to manage a number and we're going to be able to set public policy, it's my opinion we need to see that. A little later, I'm going to talk about what I've been doing with the office to create transparency and be that taxpayer watchdog. This is like one of those watchdog issues. If the number's buried in a footnote or not even in the footnote, how can policy people, the people at the top, really effectively manage that for all of us and the public? They can't. So this was a very dramatic, it's kind of like one of those accounting 100-year floods, but I think it was very important. Now, I think in 2017 in the new CAFR, you're going to see the next Gadsby, and that's the healthcare, the retiree healthcare at the county level. And don't hold me to this number too much because it may fluctuate. I think we're looking at about another $400 million in that unfunded liability. So not nearly as big as the pension hit that we did. And as I said, the bread and butter of a lot of local government, the county, is property tax. As you can see, in Orange County, we have a really good property tax base on our assessed value. It continues to go up. We're actually, population-wise, we're the third largest county in California out of the 58. Assessment-wise, we're number 2. We beat San Diego a bit by our assessed value. LA, obviously, with its size, is number 1. It's kind of a place unto itself. But this is good because that's where your local governments get the money. It's spent locally to provide services, those services we need, like fire, police, et cetera. Then there's the challenges ahead. This is what I kind of talk about, and we try to bring stuff down to a level that everyone can understand, even those who are not financial professionals. The citizens report that we provided a copy for, please take that and use that. This is what I call the mortgage payment. To make that understandable, we all have our mortgage payment every month. If some of us are lucky and don't have one anymore, I commend you, but most of us do have that mortgage payment. And that's the pension payment. This is the payment per year, how much goes into our retirement plan. Orange County is considered a 1936 Act county, which means we're not in CalPERS, we're in OSERS, which is a local pension program. And that local pension program is been run a little bit more conservative than CalPERS, but it still has its issues. As you can see, we budgeted for 16-17 that $411 million was going into the plan. In a few months, I'll see if that number was accurate or not. As you can see, that's projected upwards. Changes in the rate of assumptions. There's about 30 different factors that go into the pension liability calculation done by the actuaries. We could have kind of a 2-hour discussion about that alone, that one issue, on why that's there, where those assumptions are, and that creates this number. So this is the number we are paying each year. As you can see, that's going up significantly to $565 million in 2022. The good news is that won't be absorbed by our $700 million a year general fund, because a lot of that goes to county programs. In a minute, we'll be talking about some of the things that Newport Beach has done to help the pension situation here, and where we're trying to do similar things at the county level. And this is what I call the mortgage balance. This is how much the actual unfunded liability is. And as you can see, it spiked up in 13, or spiked down in 14, and it's heading back up. A lot of the assumptions, because in the pension and the actuarial world, they don't like these waves up and down. So they do a smoothing where, right, they'll do a 5-year kind of amortization or smoothing on anything to kind of lessen the blow, to kind of take into account the fact that a lot of this stuff we're looking at over 20 and 30-year periods. For instance, the stock market run up over, kind of the last year is not in this number. We won't see that. We may see it in next year's, maybe not, depending on when that hit. Because believe it or not, our pension system's on a calendar year end, and the county's on a fiscal year end of June, so we're kind of out of sync a little bit there at the moment. But you'll see this over time. One of the things is we want to keep a nice even number. It's not a, kind of management by, kind of short-term trends. The idea is to look at long-term trend. So that's the mortgage balance. It's ticked up to about about 4.4 billion, and it will probably tick up for the next 3 or 4 years because those amortizations, we're amortizing some changes in the assumptions of the rate of return, and et cetera, and then it'll level off or even go down. Probably by 2022, I think we're expected to be 80+% funded, which in the pension world is considered near full funding. So you see there's a lot of play in some of these numbers. And the internal audit function that is in my office, we've done a lot of auditing along the coast. Dana Point Harbor, we did that whole audit on a lot of the contractors there. These internal audits found a unauthorized friends and family program at the Dana Point Harbor and Marina Hotel. Believe it or not, the county does own a hotel in Dana Point. That was news to me when that audit came in. What happened, there was a friends and family plan where if you were a county employee and you had a friend or family coming in from out of town, you could get a nice discounted room for that friend and family for a certain amount of time. The problem is we found that the program was not sanctioned by the Board of Supervisors, kind of a big no-no. They are the policy-making entity in the county. That was number one. And number two was we found several county employees who considered themselves friends and family because they were using it for their own personal use, which was not part of the program either. Like I said, it was for a friend or a family member. And I guess they're considered themselves friends and family for a long time because some of the stays were over 200 days in a row. So that was a problem. We found that the Board of Supervisors chose to table the program. It's not an illegal program as long as they approve it. And they're considering maybe in the future bringing it back. I don't know when. And then we told the appropriate departments about the county employees who were using it, and I think some city employees too. It was kind of a mismatch there. We also, and the Dana Point Harbor was an example of what are called revenue generating leases. Orange County has 6% of the property tax, so 6 cents on that every dollar of that 1% you pay. I know that's kind of a lot of numbers there. Goes actually to county services. The rest go to schools and cities. You'll see our breakdown of the dollar in the citizens report. About 67% goes to schools. I think it's about 12, 13 to cities, maybe a little more, and then a little lesser amount to the special districts, and then the counties last. That was a function of Prop 13 back in 1978, 79, when we were a rural county. Well, now we're not a rural county anymore, but the problem with changing that allocation is it's a zero-sum game. In order for Orange County, the county to get more money, somebody else has to give up that money, which is a difficult thing to get done. So what the county does is it uses a lot of its properties to generate money to help offset some of the costs of programs. That's the lease generating. And we've had 2 audits here in Newport Beach. It's Newport Beach Dunes. I think that was one of them. And the Bayshore Marina, that we did some internal audits and got and went through that. And on the Bayshore Marina, there's about $4 million a year in revenue. The county gets about $407,000 in rent, their portion of that. And you'll love this. During that, we found that they understated their income by $85. Now, you might say, well, that's kind of a waste of county resources to chase that down for $85. Well, the intent of our audit is not to chase down money per se. As a matter of fact, on one of these audits, we found that the lessor paid too much and granted them a credit of over $11,000 back. So it's not, we're trying to find and make sure the processes were done right. For instance, not in one of these audits, we did another lease generating audit, and we found that the rent was shorted by over $2.3 million. That one hasn't come out because we haven't issued the final report on that. So we don't know what we're going to find in there, and that's not the intent of the internal audit. The internal audit's to make sure that, once again, it's that referee thing, that the rules, the procedures are being followed according to the law and the agreements that the county has made. So we don't always find big money. Sometimes we find $85, sometimes we find $2.3 million. There was an article, I think, in the Register yesterday where we found a fraud that was taking place in a drug and alcohol program. That's actually an interesting case where it was kind of one of those whistleblower issues. I was in my office at 4:30 on a Friday, honest. I was actually working at 4:30 on a Friday. And my phone rings, my desk phone rings, not one of the out front. So I had the choice to make. I say, do I let it go to voicemail and handle it on Monday, or do I just take care of it now? Well, prudence being the better part of valor, I picked up the phone and proceeded into a half-hour-long plus conversation with a gentleman who was a vendor. He was renting space to one of our other vendors, so as a vendor of a vendor. And he told me about how he wasn't getting paid his rent, which, what's that to the county? I mean, he's not getting his rent. Why is that important to the county? Well, the reason it's important because the program that he was getting his money through is called a cost reimbursement program, which means our vendor expends money on certain costs. They bring that to us at the county for the program. We say, yes, that's according to the program we've agreed to, so we're reimbursing you for those costs. Well, if you're not paying that cost, you don't have that cost to reimburse. Well, here's where it gets kind of tough on the county. The money that we were doing this with was a federal drug and alcohol program. So if the feds come in and audit us, they're going to say, wait, they didn't pay the vendor, so therefore you shouldn't have reimbursed them. So the county's kind of in the middle on a liability issue. So that's why we held them to this. They tried to go into bankruptcy. I claimed that, no, this is a fraud. I kind of dug in on that and held tough that this is a fraud. I'm not going to just let them kind of slip out of this because we potentially have a liability with the feds. So therefore, we are challenging their discharge in bankruptcy to help protect the county and the taxpayers of the county on that one. Some of the things you hear about right now is the homeless issue. And it is really a countywide issue. How does that affect Newport Beach? I've talked to friends who live down here, and they say that some of the things happening along the river trail are getting washed down, trash, whatever, down here to the beaches, which affects folks down here. The other reason it's a countywide issue is because we have like 34 cities. If one city does something or doesn't do something, the problem tends to migrate. So we really need to create solutions. The county needs to be a part of that leadership. The cities need to work with us on that. And some of the things that we're doing, we've opened up the new 200-bed Kramer site, and the county's whole view of the homeless situation is, you've heard the old adage, if you give them a fish, you feed a man for a day. If you teach him to fish, you feed him for life. The idea here is not necessarily just to house people, but to get them out of the cycle of whatever problem they're in, be it addiction, medical, mental health issues, et cetera. Trying to get them out of that and getting them back to functioning and supporting themselves. So a lot of that's the pathway. But a lot of what the county's trying to do is move them from temporary, get them cleaned up, get them services, medical attention, detoxification, et cetera, and then helping them find work and more permanent placing. This is some of the pathway. You'll see a lot of the different services that the county is providing. Also down there are some of the ones that the city is working on as well and providing. Like I say, it's a collaborative effort. It's not just a law enforcement and public safety one, but it's also a social services one, which we're trying to work with everybody to get that done. They did do a sweep of the areas around the stadium, and I think they found 2 people on outstanding warrants. and that's not as much as probably some thought. Another statistic that's not getting out there, about 147 people in the last 4 or 5 months have been transitioned through. And when I say that, they've moved out of their homeless situation. We've got them through this process, and they're actually now able to fend for themselves. So they're permanently out of the cycle. And we're going to continue to put resources in that at the county level, and we still are putting kind of the pedal to the metal there, and you'll see more of that as the next few months unfold, as those programs. Because unfortunately, these aren't easy fixes overnight. It is changing people's behavior and the cycles they're in. So it's taking some time, but it's starting to bear some fruit. Some other 2017 initiatives. Building 16, we did the groundbreaking a week ago. This is the first building built by the county in probably 30 or 40 years, since the late 70s. Part of that was put on hold because of the bankruptcy. In July, we paid off the last of our $1 billion bankruptcy bonds. I did a series of videos with our treasurer tax collector, Sherry Friedenrich, talking about where we were at the time of the bankruptcy, where the county has been, what the impact of that, and some of the safeguards that are still in place today to make sure that that bankruptcy does not happen again. Some of the initiatives I've been doing in my office is we did some anti-fraud training last year after the city of Placentia. I don't pick on the city of Placentia, it just happened to them. Any small entity, special district, city, school that doesn't have a lot of staff to do that separation of duties has always got a vulnerability to some sort of financial issue. So that's one of the things. We also put on Taxpayer Watchdog Award or Watchdog events where we are trying to talk about how the finances are on a level that people can understand. And we did one in Fullerton. And then we have our taxpayer watchdog who's on duty at all times, Jameson, and we have different iterations. And this is the way we use to engage folks and try to get them to understand what we do and understand what their government's doing. So you'll see all the different, and we try to put in accounting humor like Life Over the Pool Party, Watchdog Days of Summer as well. So anyway, I thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak. So thanks. Yeah, are we done? I don't know how we're doing on time.
So I think we have a couple more minutes that we can take some questions from the audience, and Eric would be happy to answer them.
So I wonder, if we did have a downturn and property taxes weren't quite as good, what, if any, kind of reserve does the county have?
Well, we're trying to build up our reserves, and we've had some good hits over the last few years. We had the whole thing with the VLF where we tried to offset that and we didn't prevail. The county budget office is trying to build the reserve back up. I don't have their specific number in front of me, but every year we try not to spend everything and to have that in the office or in the reserve. As you can see, we went up about $173 million on the reserve. Our negative balance on our net position was up $173 million over last year. So that's part of that reserve building up. So sorry I don't have the specific number, but it is part of the budget plan if you look in there to keep that reserve. And we actually have two reserves. There's the reserve in the equity section, but also every year when they budget, they usually put in a contingency fund of a certain amount of money for potential, if there's a big fire or something of that emergency to be there. So there's kind of I don't want to say a slush fund because it's not there. It's there for any kind of unanticipated contingencies or to fill other areas in the budget that were not budgeted correctly or precisely.
Sanctuary state. I know California is sanctuary state or not, but if it is, what's your prediction about losing funding from the Fed? What are you going to do about it?
Well, that's a board level policy decision. Yeah, if California becomes a sanctuary state, and I don't remember if Brown has signed that in that, I know it passed the legislature. If we lose our federal funding, what are we going to do at the county level? That's a board level decision. They set the policy. The problem we're going to have is we do not have reserves like you're talking about to carry those programs for very long until that's sorted out with the federal government. So if the federal government does turn off the spigot, we're going to have a major problem fairly quickly. I don't know if the CEO has had those talks with the board yet, but they're going to have some big decisions to make because that money will run out quickly.
And that light blue.
Oh yeah,
The funding that-
yeah, that's the potential area. So, you know, it's going to hit public assistance and healthcare quickly and the hardest. So that would be where it is. So they would have to make some hard and fast decisions in those areas. Oh, yeah. All right, I'll try to get to everybody.
What benefit is there of being a sanctuary city other than the Democrats getting more votes?
I'm afraid I can't, I can't answer that.
The questions that are answerable.
Yeah, I think that's beyond the scope of my office, so.
There were a few other hands.
Yeah, I'll start over here and then work that way.
In Orange County, we've combined the two roles of auditor and controller in one office under one individual. The only reason we have auditors is because of controllers. How do you, what steps do you take to avoid that?
Okay, good. It's a technical question, but a good one. First of all, the number one thing in auditors, for an auditor, is independence. And I feel that being elected directly by the population, the citizens of Orange County makes me the most independent. Interestingly enough, in state law, I have my office because I'm the county auditor. The controllership was added sometime in the 50s. And I'm ex officio controller. So if they have the office of controller, by state law, I automatically have to do that. Now, kind of getting more to the subject of your question, we bifurcate within the office. You know, the controllership is on one side of the office, the audit functions on the other. The audit function only answers to me, no one else, so there's no collusion with the controller side other at my level. But I have 400 people, most of them on the controller side, so they're really helping me as an arm to make sure everybody on the controller side is doing their job correctly. Also, most county departments are run by the CEO's office. We have 6 elected departments, and then the rest is run under the CEO's office. So I'm really auditing the work of management of the CEO's office for most of the county, and then the other 5 electeds. Now, where the auditing in my office comes is we're very heavily audited by the outside auditors and the state and federal auditors when they come in to look at our grants and everything. And we get 2 outside audits, one on our federal grants, the single audit, which we have about, I think, $700 million a year or more in federal monies that we get, and then any state auditors from the state controllers. So.
I was intrigued by your story about the whistleblower that called you Friday afternoon. How much do you think is that kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of
Well,
recovery homes that are all over Newport?
It-
How does that contribute to our homelessness?
yeah, and I look at that. I mean, I don't know how it contributes to the homelessness. It can't have a positive effect because part of ending homelessness is breaking some of the cycles of addiction that these folks have. I don't know. What we saw in this audit, I think, was isolated to this vendor. I don't necessarily think it was a systemic issue with them. What we got back from the healthcare agency, and this was kind of interesting for us, the service they provided, we got good marks on. They were always happy with the service provided. It was just some of the things we found in the way they were spending the money in the back room that was negative. I think we're asking for $300,000 right now. I think we may be up to $600,000 in the period we looked at. But this vendor, we were a small contract for them. They actually have other counties that they're contracted with that are much bigger than us. There's only a couple of those, so I'm sure you can figure out who they are. And I think their investigations, from what I understand, I'm not sure of exactly where they're at in those as well. Anybody over here? Any of the students? One more question, anybody? Not one of our students from the, oh, come on. One of you has to have a question, all right? Anyway, if not, thank you again. I'll stay here for a while if there's any other questions. Oh, is there another one? Okay, all right. Well, once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you this morning.
Okay, so backing up a minute to introducing the other VIPs who were here. Diane Dixon was here. She's our city councilwoman who was mayor last term. And she had a meeting to get to, so she just left. Jeff Brower was here. He's the deputy chief of police. And also Craig Batley is here, and he is the chairman of the board of directors of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce. So kind of responsible for us being here. With that, I would, and by the way, thank you very much, Eric. That was very interesting. He made a really interesting point. I don't know if any of you caught it, but you hear a lot of political rhetoric in probably every city and every county that this pension problem is somebody's fault. And it probably is, but those somebodies are many, many somebodies from a very long time ago. And so when fingers are pointed at Newport Beach City Council, for example, they're being pointed in the wrong direction. So I just thought I'd kind of point that out. Because as...
But I think your council's been very positive. I think
right.
Like a rainy day fund.
Exactly. Our city council has been working on this for years. So that's good. I would like to bring up Pam Smith. She is the critical piece of the Newport Beach Chamber, and she'll let you know what's coming up.
Good morning. So next week we have our business luncheon series, and we're starting to move those around town. So we'll be having that at Bayside Restaurant next week. So RSVP on that. We have our mixer at Canaletto on the 26th of October. If you're a member, it's free. If you're not a member, it's $35 unless you're interested in the chamber, and then you'll be our guest. And then we have our economic forecast coming up once a year. It's with UCLA Anderson School, and we have 3 people on the panel, guest speakers. Steve's really excited about this. This panel is probably the most exciting that we've had, and that's Friday, the October 27th, and we're moving it to a luncheon instead of a breakfast. So that's all up on our website. And then the last one is our Inspire group, which is our women's group, which men are definitely invited as well. We focus on women's business issues, and we're having Sheriff Sandra Hutchins come. She is getting ready to term out, so she's going to come speak with us. And we're also partnering with WIN, which is Women in Newport Networking. So we're excited about that as well. And we have limited seating on that, so that one will sell out. So make sure you don't wait till the last moment on that. And thank you. Dorothy?
Thank you for being here. That economic forecast event, by the way, is really good and really important. So I would urge you to try to be there. So with that, you are dismissed.